All right, part 2. In 1850, gold was discovered in California. So the mint decided to add extra coins to disperse the wealth across the nation. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln decided to print paper to finance the Civil War with paper money called the greenbacks. Excuse me. So in order for it to be legal, the wording on the paper had to have a specific value and specific wording to make it a legal document. It was basically an IOU, not really money. It stated on there that it was a promise to pay, as it was a promissory note. After the war, the mint went back to coining money. In 1878, the U.S. was still issuing U.S. dollars in forms of notes. In 1886, the Treasury started issuing silver and gold certificates, which was payable on demand backed by gold or silver. So we had 4 different types of money going on. We had coins, certificates, the notes, and bank notes, along with the, well, when I said notes, I meant to say U.S. notes too. So they started printing the Federal Reserve notes, which was written on a note that was redeemable in gold on demand at the Treasury Department in Washington, or in gold coining or lawful money at any reserve bank. So most of the money that was deposited in the banks was not actually kept at the bank. It was loaned out immediately. So once the money is loaned out immediately, it meant that now it was available to be spent, which they said it increased the money supply of the country. So basically, for the Federal Reserve to increase the country's money supply, they just had to increase bank deposits. So to do the reverse, they had to decrease bank deposits. And they did this by buying and selling bonds. Now, a bond is a debt issued by a company, government, or government agency in order to borrow money for a specific amount of time. To obtain the money, borrowers make promises. First, they promise to make regular interest payments. Then they promise to pay back the original sum of money after the specific amount of time has passed. So basically, the bond is just like an IOU. Now, people, companies, and governments usually buy bonds because it's a guaranteed rate of return on their investment. So you've heard of the U.S. government. They borrow a lot of money, but they have different types, because when you buy money for a short amount of time, it's called a treasury bill. When you buy bonds for probably 1 to 10 years, it's called a treasury note. And to buy a bond which is longer, it's called longer, like 10 years, it's called actually the treasury bond. So I'm gonna just function treasury bond and all of them. So now you know the difference. It depends on the time is what it's called. So when they create new money is when the bank loans out money. So the reason why feds can manipulate the system is that only money in the form of cash can be loaned out. But money in the form of bonds cannot be loaned out, since bond money stays where it is. It just doesn't circulate because it doesn't increase the money supply. It's just a IOU. So if you go back to, I don't know if you remember the credit unions and all that stuff, when the people tried to get all their money back, they can't take all their money out at once because the banks don't have it. So in order to In order for the banks to increase the money supply, the Fed moves money from bonds into cash. To decrease the money supply, the Fed moves money from cash to bonds. So let's go back and forth. So the Fed do not actually have money. They just make it up. So, gold remains on the books as an asset, but it belongs to the shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank and no longer to the American people. Franklin Roosevelt in 1932 demonetized gold, and in 1933 he ordered all private gold coins to be confiscated, which devalued the dollar. All the gold ended up in the Federal Reserve Vault, and it was exchanged with money that was printed out of the air. They called that as stimulating the economy. Well, Franklin Roosevelt called it stimulating the economy. And the Feds rapidly expanded the printing of the notes. Dollar fell in 1957, and the Treasury produced the last certificate. And it was so common that they had switched out certificates to this form of money we have now. We didn't even notice it was gone. In 1963, John F. Kennedy signed an executive order reauthorizing silver certificates and silver dollars, and he was assassinated shortly after. Lyndon Baines Johnson did not share his vision, so the order was not carried out. Nothing in the system stopped the rapid expansion of creating money, and it was not being backed by gold anymore. The French was worried about us being able to pay for the Vietnam War, so they began to cash in their dollars for gold. And then President Nixon, Richard Nixon, at 8/15/1971, ended the dollar convertibility from dollars to gold. But one good thing that is still and could save us is that the Coinage Act of 4/2/1792 still stands and has not been amended, which means Congress can fix our issues just by amending something to the Constitution or writing something to the Constitution or trying to enforce the Coinage Act that still stands.